Wonderful. So aloha, everyone. Welcome to the December meeting for the Climate Reality Oahu, Hawaii chapter. This month, we have a guest speaker, Barry Solomon from the Citizens Climate Lobby, to share a bit about his organization, maybe talk about the different carbon taxes at the federal and state level. And so without further ado, welcome, Barry.
Thank you, Sebastian, and thanks for inviting me. I'd like to provide a brief introduction of myself as it's relevant to what I'll be talking about. I've lived on Maui for just 5 years, and this is following 20 plus years as a professor of environmental policy at Michigan Technological University. And before that, I had worked for the US federal government at the US Department of Energy and the Environmental Protection Agency. My specialties include energy policy and climate change, and I've published extensively on these subjects. And before coming to Michigan Tech, when I was working for the federal government, I also spent a few years working for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the so-called IPCC. And as a result, I co-authored a few reports on the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in the early 1990s. As members of of Climate Reality know, for this work, the IPCC was a co-recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize along with Al Gore in 2007. Now that the Biden administration is going to be taking power soon, climate policy is once again, thankfully, going to be a national priority. While the first step is going to be to rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement in January of 2021, meeting or exceeding the US commitment will be impossible without new, strong climate change legislation. So today I'd like to share with you some very exciting news about an organization that is conducting a targeted campaign that, if successful, by focusing on passage of one specific law, will result in a reduction of carbon dioxide emissions by 40% over the next 12 years and eventually a 90% cut. I'll provide you with some more details about this organization, our campaign, and how we'll achieve these results, and how you also can be part of this exciting effort for those of you who aren't already members of this other organization. So the group I'm referring to, of course, is the Citizen Climate Lobby, or CCL for short. It is an international, nonpartisan, not-for-profit, and tax-exempt group under IRS Code 501c3 and 501c4. We have over 180,000 volunteer members and chapters in every state of the United States. In Hawaii, we have approximately 870 members in chapters on the islands of Maui, Oahu, Kauai, and the Big Island. Our main activity, as the name would suggest, is lobbying at the federal level, but also to some extent at the state and local level for legislation that addresses climate change, which I don't have to tell all of you is an existential threat to all of us. So we're very busy. This year, members of the CCL and teams of 3 to 7 people visited via Zoom with almost every member of the US House of Representatives and the United States Senate. Many representatives and senators actually attended these meetings, while the rest of them sent a senior staff member. In past years, before the pandemic, these lobby days were accomplished by sending CCL members to Washington, DC on their own dime. And in case you're wondering, our own Hawaii representatives and senators are generally very supportive of our efforts and the concept that we're promoting, carbon pricing, especially Senator Brian Schatz of Hawaii, who's playing a leadership role in the United States Senate in a bipartisan way. So specifically, the work of CCL at the federal level revolves around lobbying for a specific bill in the US House of Representatives that promises to be a crucial piece of the puzzle in the fight to lessen climate change. Once approved, this bill will provide a 40% reduction in greenhouse gases over the first 12 years. The name of the bill is the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. HR 763 is the number it's been assigned. It was originally introduced first in January of 2019, then again in January of 2020. And while it didn't pass this year, we're much more hopeful about our chances next year, and it will be reintroduced next month. The similar bill, by the way, passed in Hawaii in the state Senate in March of 2020. There were some differences that I don't need to go into at this time unless you're interested later. But due to the COVID-19 shutdown, that bill never got a hearing in the State House of Representatives. But our understanding is this is also going to be reintroduced next year. A few days before the shutdown, our team on Maui, at the request of the Maui County Council, made some presentations, and our council unanimously passed a resolution supporting both the federal and the state bill here, so that was very helpful. Now back to the bill and some of the specifics. This bill at the federal level, HR 763, is part of the strategy known as carbon pricing, which is essential for effectively reducing greenhouse gas emissions to stop the worst effects of climate change. Most analysts have for decades assumed to deal with this problem, you either need a cap and trade bill or some sort of direct carbon pricing mechanism, and this bill is the latter. But if you go internationally, you'll see a mixture of these strategies. So carbon pricing, the basis of it is that the fossil fuel combustion represents the major source of greenhouse gases that are causing global warming and climate change. So the strategy is very simple: to make carbon-based fossil fuels, namely coal, natural gas, and petroleum, more expensive to reflect the damage that they do to the environment and human health. A fee would be assessed on fluorinated greenhouse gases as well. These are the substitutes that have been used for the chlorofluorocarbons that were phased out. And the fluorinated greenhouse gases are also very strong greenhouse gases, so we can't ignore these. So the fees would then go on to the major uses of, say, the fossil fuels. So in Hawaii, this is largely the electric power sector and the transportation industry. The idea is to get them to, or incentivize them to replace polluting fuels with renewable sources such as solar and wind power, as well as increased energy efficiency over time, and that includes electric vehicles charged with renewable energy sources. So that's the energy innovation part of this bill, where otherwise it doesn't get into details or pick winners and losers as far as favored energy sources. So in Hawaii, our fossil fuel use is primarily petroleum products for transportation fuels and electric power generation. As most of you no doubt know, we only use coal in Oahu, provides about 10 to 15% of the island's electric power at the AES coal-fired plant, and virtually no natural gas use in Hawaii. And the AES coal plant, by the way, is slated to shut down in a little less than 2 years, I believe. So the intent in carbon pricing, again, is to make polluters pay more and to accelerate the switch to renewable energy sources. That is already going on, but simply to accelerate that. As you know, we're already using a lot of renewable energy in Hawaii, and our state has an existing policy for 100% renewable electricity use by the year 2045. So this bill at the federal level simply complements our existing state policy in that area. Now back to some more specifics about the fee. The fee in fossil fuel use would be placed as a surcharge of sorts on fossil fuel use at the point of first use within every state. And it would start initially at $15 per metric ton and increase at a rate of $10 per metric ton of CO2 equivalent emissions per year until the job is essentially done. So the fee would be assessed at the point of first sale to the fossil fuel users in industry and transportation sector within each individual state. So the problem, or one problem with this, of course, a critic would say, well, they're just going to increase their prices and pass it on to consumers. Well, this is true, but only partially true. There's something called price elasticity of demand in economics. So as you make something more expensive, we generally use less of it over time. And the consumers still pay, but they have an ability to pay less as they change their behavior over time. And of course, emissions will be less over time as those switching goes on as well. Now, the good news about this bill is that the tactic that makes it innovative is that would be the carbon dividend. The idea here is that the funds generated by the fees collected would go into a national trust, which would essentially be managed by an agent of the US Department of the Treasury. The funds would then be distributed back to almost all US citizens monthly by check, just like the same mechanism that Social Security payments are made today. And basically, each adult would get a full payment, and children or people under the age of 18 in a household would get a half payment the way it works. So in this manner, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act assures that consumers will not be punished by the energy companies when they increase their prices. So they'll have these monies back, and they'll have an ability to spend that elsewhere, presumably not on energy, and something that's going to result in emitting a lot less greenhouse gases. Okay, so the funds will ultimately go directly to consumers and not be kept at the government or in industry, although there is a minor administrative fee to run the program. I think it's 2%. So neither the government nor industry have any claims on the funds, so we can be assured that we, the US citizens, will be the only recipients and empowered to do what we want with them. Susan, you have a question?
Question, what did you have, like, what the average American would get back, say a family of four or something? I think.
Yeah, I'm gonna get at that a little later.
Sorry.
So of course it'll increase over time, and as far as the mechanism of collecting the fund and redistributing it, it's really fairly simple. All of these monies go into this trust, and based on what is collected, the manager of the trust or administrator of the trust will know how much money is there, and it'll be a simple formula to figure out how much is returned to people throughout the country. So the amount for all adults will be equal, irrespective of where we live, and same for minors. But I'll come back to the specific amount a little later. Now, I had an infographic I shared with Sebastian. If you have that, could you share it on the screen? If not, if I have the power to share screen, I could do that as well. That'll go over some of this.
I made you a co-host, Barry, so you should be able to share.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, I just have to open it.
Oh, Barry, we have a question in the chat. Is there a link to the bill, both the HR
Yes.
763 and the state one?
Yes, you can get it at the link for the organization, which will be the end of the infographic. Can everybody see the infographic, by the way?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you want me to put that link in the chat? Would
Sure,
that be helpful? Yeah,
sure.
okay.
And then to answer on the state level, 3150, it'll be reintroduced in January, and probably under another number. So when that comes out,
We'll
you
be
know, we'll let you know what that bill number will be.
Yeah, and in general, it's always very easy to find any bill before Congress. Years ago, they created the system called Thomas Locator, after Thomas Jefferson, because that's part of one of the buildings of the Library of Congress. And so you just put in the name of the bill and it'll pop up there, but it's also on the site of our organization. Okay, so I just wanted to walk through what's on the infographic from the top to the bottom. So to begin with, the bill is bipartisan. Well, of course, that's true, but just barely. We got 2 new supporters a few days ago. So we're up to 84 co-sponsors now. 83 of those are Democrat, 1's Republican. But in some of the meetings on the lobby days, there are other Republicans who said unofficially they would vote for the bill, even though they're not a co-sponsor now if it came up for a vote. So we always the optimists, we're hopeful to get some more Republican co-sponsors in the future, but we're up to 84. Okay, as the next entry tells us, the bill will be effective in driving down carbon pollution, good for people and good for the economy. And it's revenue neutral in the sense that there won't be a net retention of the funds initially collected by the surcharge. It'll all be returned minus the small administrative fee. So in that sense, it doesn't raise taxes. So the benefit of the bill via the surcharge, and so here is the initial answer to Susan's question. So on here it indicates a family of 4 would get 4,400 approximately as an annual dividend for a typical family of 4 in year 10. And after around 5 years, it would be around $3,000 per family. The amount goes up over time. I do have to caution, to be intellectually honest, these numbers are subject to change somewhat because they were calculated before the pandemic and the subsequent crash of the economy. And all this is based on a baseline assumption of baseline economic growth and what would happen as this bill is superimposed on that kind of future. Because energy demand changes, obviously fossil fuel demand has gone way down. A lot of oil fields are being tapped these days and so on. Coal mines are being closed. Okay, around 80% of households would get a boost or break even in this system through the dividend. And what this means is you could think of the different income distributions. Some of us are rich, some of us are poor. And so depending on where we stand on the income spectrum, that will determine if the return of this average dividend amount for us breaks us even or is a plus. So for the vast majority of us, it's a net gain, and only some of the super wealthy are better off. It's not going to be a gain. So that's what that is referring to. Okay, going down, 2.1 million local jobs created. So I could tell you a few things about this. You know, I'm actually familiar with the model that was used to do impact analysis of this bill at Columbia University. It's a model called REMI, Regional Economic Model, Inc. I subcontracted with them around 15 years ago for a study of my own on biofuels. And basically, this is a comprehensive dynamic economic impact analysis model that looks at the effects of a policy change, such as this bill, the fees, and the dividend, and among other things, the effect on employment. So you can think of employment in three parts: direct, indirect, and induced. Direct employment, direct jobs are, say, direct jobs would be in the fossil fuel industry. There would be jobs lost as demand goes down and less people are working in oil and gas and coal. But some indirect effects on renewable energy industries is there would be a net gain in jobs because they're more employment intensive. And we know this in Hawaii, where we have a lot of jobs in the renewable energy field, and that would be extended nationwide. But there's other jobs that are created by induced effects of new spending from this bill. This would be new spending by people who are gaining these jobs, as well as people spending their dividend, right? So those have expansionary effects on the economy that reverberate all the way through. And I think the studies showed that the main sectors gaining jobs would be retail, trade, and medical and healthcare. And that's because of the spending effects that are induced by the dividend and the new employment. Okay, on the right, we see something about $240 billion in annual costs from environmental and health harms from fossil fuels. Those are effects we want to get rid of, right? So what those are damages that are experienced from health effects, largely from fine particles from coal combustion and oil combustion. So as we use less coal and we use less oil throughout the economy over time, we offset or reduce those annual environmental and health harms from fossil fuel combustion. And that also, those effects are in terms of mortality as well as morbidity. So it's been calculated, as we see on the next line, around 114,000 lives are lost each year due to air pollution. And over time, through the effect of this bill, we would save 295,000 lives. So those are some of the other benefits from this legislation. Okay, so the calculation is that we would reduce carbon dioxide emissions and their equivalent by 40% over 12 years of implementation of this bill, and eventually we would get to 90%, which is the ultimate goal. Okay. Yeah, and so some of these analyses were done by a study at Columbia University that came out about a year ago that are reflected in these numbers, and I think there's links to it on our website. So at the bottom here, we have more information on some of these statistics involved in estimating the effects of the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act and the Citizen Climate Lobby. And this is important for people who are not members. We want everyone to join, and it's free to join. You can visit our website, www.citizensclimatelobby.org. and click on the link to join right there, and very quickly they would send you back to the Hawaii office of it and put you in touch with people and the particular island based on where you live. And so it's important that we expand our numbers beyond the ones I cited earlier, or current members of the Citizen Climate Lobby, to show the strength behind what we're doing. And for those who don't know, I wanted to mention some of the things that we do in Citizen Climate Lobby. We have a couple very active people on this call who are an important part of our efforts. So in addition to lobbying at the federal, state, and local level, we write Congress people at various times. We write letters to the editor and local newspapers. Sometimes we can even get on television news to help educate the public about what we do. And when we get beyond this pandemic and we'll have outreach efforts in the community again, we can sit at tables at local colleges and community events and explain the importance of these efforts and how directly it can get us back on track for the precious time we've lost this last 4 years on climate change. Okay, that's largely all I have. So I wonder if there's any other questions, and I can get rid of the infographic unless anyone still needs it.
Well, mahalo. That was really great. I certainly have my own questions, but I'd open the floor to anyone else.
But I see there's a lot in chat. I haven't read any of it, so I don't know if there's any questions in chat.
I tried to respond. I tried to respond to them, Barry, while you were,
You got a rapid response team here with no. Okay, maybe Sebastian, you can start with your question then.
Sure. So I guess one of my questions, because I know there may be a lot of people in Climate Reality Project who are interested in joining the Citizens Climate Lobby. You mentioned that they can sign up through the website, and then they'll get directed to the Hawaii chapters.
Yes.
Do you conduct like trainings or boot camps for writing letters, or like training process?
Yeah, we do a whole range of things like that. Each chapter, since we've subgrouped, on the 4 main islands, have periodic meetings where they set their own agendas, and we do have occasional state meetings where various chapters in the state come together. And these boot camp things, we have those as well. We had a recent workshop that covered some of that. I've written about 6 letters to the editor, and I shared some of those with people like Molly, who's our state coordinator. So yes, those things happen periodically, and we just share resources from time to time. And there's been special events like the awesome movie the Oahu chapter did fairly recently that focused on the U.S. Department of Defense moving in the direction of renewable energy, which was nice to see. It was back when I was teaching at Michigan Tech. That was something I would lecture on occasionally in an energy class that I taught. So it's good to see some more recent evidence of it. So
yeah, the other thing, sorry, go ahead, Susan.
Oh, I was just going to say, so I'm with the Oahu chapter, and Noelle's with the Big Island chapter, and Barry's with Maui, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so let's see, Amy and Leon, are you both on Oahu or?
Yeah, both on.
Yeah. So I can send you a link. We have a meeting this Wednesday, actually. After this, I can go ahead and send you an invite to that. But also, I did want to add that on the ccl.org website itself, there's a lot of, and for Sebastian too, there's a lot of pre-recorded trainings there as well. But we do, again, like Barry said, we do have via Zoom, used to be live, via Zoom training. Like we had an island-wide one in September about different aspects of what we do. And yeah, so we have, I think each chapter usually has a monthly meeting. So I'll let Noel and Barry also talk about theirs.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we've been a little inactive lately in Mali, but hopefully that will change as the politics and things like that change very shortly, right? But yeah, so the point is, it's not just the lobbying, and that was emphasized in the last workshop that we had. We had so-called grassroots and grass tops and media were some of the main topics for subgroups that we had. And there's someone from Portland who's showed up a lot to help us in some of these efforts.
Yeah, I'll just add that for Hawaii Island, we do have monthly meetings where we invite the public and also individuals who are interested in learning about the organization, and also members who would like to learn how to participate more. Also want to just share that once you've joined CCL, you're given access to another version of the website. So it's a community website where you actually have access to even more information, more training, more resources, including forums where you can actually ask questions or research questions that you may have that may have been addressed already by other groups. So once, obviously there's a lot of information on the general public site, which you have a link to, but there's also even more information you'll have access to, and resources you'll have access to once you join. And I'll also say that I think that Climate Reality and CCL are very complementary. In fact, many of the members are members in both. Susan, myself, as an example, and yeah, the knowledge we learn about the climate crisis and the need for action, and the need to empower everybody with the knowledge of what's going on and what they can do, really complements very well the different solutions that are out there, including carbon pricing. So it's a, as far as I'm concerned, it's a win-win for folks to be involved in both.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very upbeat, active group, and it's easy to get discouraged in this field. I have to say from personal experience, I started working on climate change in 1989, January of 1989, and we wrote two major reports to Congress. One that I co-authored was called Policy Options for Stabilizing Global Climate. It was about a 1,000-page report, and it didn't take very long to realize that a major hindrance to the work we were trying to do in the climate division at EPA was the lack of federal legislation to support us. And so here we are going on 31 years later, same thing. And, at the time, I remember hearing Al Gore speak at MIT at a conference that year. The years can really fly by, but you can't lose hope. So hopefully much better things will come this next year.
Yeah, and actually, I would love to ask you about that. You mentioned you have this career working for the Department of Energy and then the EPA and contributing to the IPCC reports. What is your sense of where we're at with carbon legislation or climate legislation? Like, do you think we're going at a decent pace, an acceptable pace, or?
No, it's way too late, frankly, but you make the best with the hand you've been dealt with, right? if you've seen The Inconvenient Truth, at the time we were told we have 10 years less to start major action, and it's been more than 10 years, right? So yeah, no, it's not a decent pace at all. It's totally unacceptable. But having said that, cautiously optimistic that we'll make better progress this coming year. And maybe sometimes people have to be shamed into understanding that they've waited too long to do something, but they can still act.
Do you associate the policy challenges to like fossil fuel industry lobbying, or are there other kind of like major players that are throwing a wrench into the works of progress?
Some of the major industrial users align themselves with them. Over the years, there's been anti-climate lobby groups, and they're usually made up of large industry and fossil fuel sectors. But on the other side, you have individual companies who've taken very positive action, and that has, oh, by the way, I just had to let somebody in who's in the waiting room. I don't know if
Oh,
I only have that ability when I got the screen share. In any event, yeah, so there's been groups on both sides, for decades. And I think, one encouraging thing is some major companies are doing a very good job of being carbon neutral, like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and so on, are major purchasers of renewable energy and renewable energy certificates and so on. A lot of that is picked up in the last 5-10 years.
Thank you. And then I have one last question, which is maybe a bit in the weeds. But how do you see a carbon tax playing with other, I guess, policy mechanisms like
Right.
like the RPS, or I don't know, like a cap and trade and a carbon
Yeah,
tax
I can go
exists
into
among
that.
clients?
Okay, so the way the bill we're supporting is written, um, it would require a pause on sort of duplicative policies. So things like the Clean Power Plan, which was passed under Obama, but pretty much killed under Trump, that would be an issue if that would be revised. The renewable portfolio standards are only at the state level, so they would not be affected by this. It would only be federal policies that would potentially be affected like that. Senator Schatz has his own legislation that's a little bit different. So if these pass, or I should say when they pass, differences would have to be ironed out. That's the normal process. So that is addressed specifically in HR 763. There's a border tax adjustment, or if you have import of goods from countries that are not playing along and pricing carbon. So there's a lot that would have to be worked out as far as that goes. But it would not preempt state policies. So, that does raise a question if the bill in the Hawaii State Legislature passes, if that becomes essentially duplicative. Well, it depends on the details, and that's a problem we'd love to have, right? Worry about that later. Susan?
Barry, did you want to talk a little bit about the European Union, I believe, is
Yeah.
putting a price on carbon in 2022, what that's going to do to borders like us?
Yeah, I don't have the latest on that, but this is my understanding. The European Union, I worked a lot on emissions trading actually when I was at EPA for the sulfur dioxide cap and trade program. So I have a background in that as well, and I've done research and publication in that area. So the European Union had a major cap and trade system for carbon dioxide in place that they created after the old Kyoto protocol. They set it kind of at not a very ambitious level, so it's having some effect, but it's not resulting in substantial emission reduction. So they want to extend that, and they want to extend that, to more direct carbon pricing. So a cap and trade system actually does create a carbon price, but it creates it indirectly, where a bill like ours, and by the way, Sebastian, people supporting the bill, they don't like it to be called a carbon tax because that's a bad word in some people's vernacular. It's a fee, right? So they play those kinds of games. But with a carbon fee or a carbon tax, you set the price directly, where with a cap and trade system, you cap the total level of emissions in the system, and that ultimately results in a price to meet that level. So it's an indirect way to do it. So I think the idea is to amend that and increase it. Yes.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking of, I thought I had read that starting in 2022 or 2023, the European Union was going to put a tariff on any country that didn't put a price on carbon, so that when we try to sell our fossil fuels to the European Union, we're going to be at a disadvantage. So I was wondering if that was going to maybe push us on a federal level to do something.
Well, if we have a sane federal government, yeah, that's a big part of the equation. I actually don't know a lot about that. You may know more about it than me, but the general answer to the question is yes, that's common sense that you compete in an international arena, and it's better not to have constant trade wars. They're pretty destructive. And so you can proactively address these things by, and that's part of the job of John Kerry, the new climate envoy. That'll be part of his job. He'll go over to Europe, discuss this, and come back, say, guess what? We really need to do this, or we're going to be at a disadvantage. And pretty obvious, but that'll be part of what he does.
Yeah, and I think,
If I may,
oh, go ahead.
sorry, Susan.
And is this the first time we've had someone like John Kerry at the caliber of, you know what I mean, addressing climate change? I think Al Gore called for it years ago, but is this the first time we've had someone?
At a higher level, yeah. When we've had over the years international climate meetings, there's always a lead of the delegation. It's usually someone from the Department of State, and usually there's an interagency group. But this is putting it at a somewhat higher level. It's not a cabinet level position, but it'll elevate the visibility.
Good, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to add that on the point, Susan, you raised. The EU beat us to the punch, literally, right? Because one of the components of the carbon dividend and the HR 763 bill is that there would be the border adjustment, And would essentially mean that if a country was importing some, fossil fuel intensive products into the U.S. and they didn't have a comparable, price on carbon, that there would be some penalty, right? And it would be to encourage, leveling the playing field. And what we've heard, and I put a chat in the chat, I put a little article in there, I think was published by CCL, CCL contributed to this, that essentially what the EU had announced is essentially akin to that. So they beat us to the punch, but the bottom line is that this concept is being adopted across the globe in major economies, and we have the opportunity to step up and catch up. The other thing I'd like to share is that the appetite for carbon pricing, even in Congress, has increased. Right, in the past Congress, there were like a dozen or so. I'm reading here a report, a dozen or so carbon pricing bills that were raised, and also across different sectors. Be it business, local governments, economists, and so on and so forth, faith groups. Just the number of organizations and entities that are now supporting a price on carbon is just just highlights the fact that this is the right thing to do, number one, and the barriers to getting this thing adopted are falling. So we're very hopeful that in this coming Congress and with the new administration, and more importantly, just recognition across all groups, including I'll call them the young Republicans, that there will be definitively action on the climate and effective action, including a price on carbon.
Yeah, in the past, often some of the roadblocks mentioned were, but this country isn't doing enough, or China isn't doing enough, or India isn't doing enough. When the meeting occurred in Copenhagen to follow up the Kyoto Protocol, I think it was 2008, possibly, or no,
2009.
2009. Yeah, I actually was there for one day. I was at a meeting in Sweden and took the train down, couldn't get into the main meeting, but it fell apart at the end because of concern. China had some concerns, and some of the other countries like India and South Africa. So those barriers have gradually gone away. I mean, maybe China hasn't done enough, but they've done a lot since then. They've certainly changed their trajectory somewhat. So, they're trying more than we can say for the last 4 years in this country.
And then just quickly, in the chat, someone asked, is there some outreach to youth? So CCL also has something very cool, which is called action teams. And there is a youth action team. And they're kind of like subgroups that reach. So we have Honolulu, say you have Honolulu chapter, right? But I'm also a member of the Methodist action team. So those are Methodists from across the country. And we have meetings about how we can give presentations to our congregations and then get more endorsements and more support. So there's also these action teams that have a broader appeal. They may have a sort of a little narrow like youth, but then in other instances, they kind of have a broader appeal because you're meeting with people all over the country and trying to get the word out within, say, the youth. So that's another whole bunch of opportunities CCL offers.
I'll mention one other effort along those lines. There's a group I've supported in the past called Our Children's Trust, Juliana versus United States, 2015. It was 21 youth lawsuits on climate change, and it went pretty far. They ultimately lost, but their similar lawsuits are going on in other countries. And it's a group based in Oregon that is pushing this, the Our Children's Trust climate-related lawsuit, so they haven't totally lost hope. It was partly an issue of standing, and it was determined that they had standing, but that didn't carry the day in the end. Any other questions?
Hey, Susan, I just wanted to say that I was in a CCL training today and I learned about action teams. I've been with the organization for 3 years and I didn't realize that they had all these different, specialties. And I learned that there's an ocean and seafood action team and also a coastal impacts action team. So there's got to be an action team for just about anything.
Yeah, there's a whole list of them. Yeah, and the coastal ones, so you're talking to people not only in the islands in the Pacific, but Florida and California. And yeah, so
Carolina,
it's really interesting to get into some of those teams as well,
yeah, so hope we can get some new members.
So along those lines, if we have some, let's say, high school folks that want to get involved with the CCL youth action team or whatever it may be, they would first join the local chapter, and then there's a way to communicate that they want to join that action team, or what's the best way for them?
Yeah, we've had some on Maui, people's daughters and sons, maybe starting with a school project, or some genius kids who are concerned about the future. So we've done that, but since we like to have more members join that way, and then you can do things locally, but also put you in touch with the appropriate action team.
Yeah, if I may, I'll just share my screen real quick here. I have, I pulled up this, can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is community. This is what I was referring to earlier. Once you're a member of Citizens Climate Lobby, you get another view of the content, and this is one of them. So when you search for action teams, when you get to the page, you merely click join, and you'll be part of that group, and you have the opportunity to check, the discussions that are happening, and so on and so forth. So the key is to join the organization, and once you join the organization, you have access to all these resources, including the ability to join all these different action teams.
Yeah, I guess with youth, it's just a question if it's somebody who needs or wants a mentorship versus someone who's more a self-starter, can get going on their own. We've had a few really good kids from high school and young college students as well in Maui.
Awesome. Well, we're a little past time even. But thank you so much, Barry, for coming and sharing your experience and about the carbon.
My pleasure. And maybe in the future, if people are interested, I wouldn't mind talking about what's going on in other countries, if that's something of interest to you. And I haven't been focusing on it much recently, but it's an important topic. I've been working more on renewable energy transitions, and that's been occupying me, but climate policies going on all over the place, different ways. And cap and trade and carbon pricing, can work together when you're dealing with different countries. You're not going to get the same policies everywhere, but there's ways to harmonize that, so they work together.
Yeah, that would be great to have you back to continue the discussion. I look forward to that. And so just so oh yeah.
Somebody had a last question. What kind of organizations locally does CCL partner with on the youth front? I don't know if anyone has a good answer for that. On Maui, we've just worked with individuals rather than youth organizations per se.
Same on Honolulu. They've just joined, maybe our lobbying team and, the monthly chapter meetings. But yeah, I can look into that and get back to you.
That was Leon.
Do that. Yeah, let me save the chat and I can get back to you on that.
Great.
Thanks, Susan.
Wonderful. And then just last minute notes for our climate reality leaders out there. We're hoping to do some elections for chapter leadership in the coming months. So if you want to get more involved with CRP and working with, these fellow organizations on the island and getting more active in just climate action from a civil society engagement standpoint, please consider running for just chapter leadership. And if you have a role in mind, you can propose the role. Right now, it's just sort of a team leadership effort. So it's kind of a horizontal leadership architecture. Yeah, currently me and Joshua are holding the co-chair position as the initial founders of the chapter, but we would love to invite anyone who's interested to get involved. And the next meeting will be the second Sunday in January. I believe that is the 9th, 10th.
And Sebastian, are you still expecting us to bring the En-ROADS presentation on that during that session?
Yes, so we're going to have another presentation concerning the Citizens Climate Lobby, kind of continuing this discussion on kind of like climate legislature and how us everyday citizens can get involved. Wonderful.
So that's on the 9th, right? On the 9th.
On the 10th.
Saturday's the
Second
9th. Yeah, the
Sunday.
10th, same time,
The
4
10th.
o'clock.
Okay, great. I'll get that confirmed for us.
Yes, I will send a calendar invite for future meetings, and info on it should be in the weekly newsletters, and then on the Facebook page, and on everywhere else. Yeah, well, thank you again. And hopefully people can find this recording without too much trouble. Yeah, mahalo.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you so much.
Have a
And
great week, everyone.
Noel for using the Zoom, and Sebastian for putting this all together, and Leon and Joshua and Amy for coming.
Thanks. Take care, everyone. Thanks, Greg.
Bye.